with Wolfgang Baur of Cobalt Quarterly. We also do have Ryan J. Costello, or Ryan Costello Jr., my apologies, as
It's all
our
right.
moderator for this panel. And they will be talking in regards to Freelancing 101. And I will leave it up to you two.
Thank you very much, Eric.
You're welcome.
Eric did mention that Wolfgang Baur is most famous right now for being the editor-in-chief, or up until yesterday, actually, editor-in-chief of Cobalt Quarterly, and we'll definitely talk about that. But he's also the publisher of what was Open Design and is now known as Cobalt Press, and actually has a long history in the RPG industry. So, Wolfgang, while people start bringing in their questions about Freelancing 101, our topic today, why don't you introduce yourself and how you got into the gaming industry?
Sure. Well, I started in the gaming industry as a freelancer by throwing queries over the fence, through the mail, on paper. God, I'm old. To TSR and to Dragon Magazine and Dungeon Magazine. And I was published there while I was still a minor and had to get my parents sign the contracts for me because I could not sign away the rights to TSR without their permission. Later on, I went to work at TSR. Then I worked at Wizards of the Coast as a staffer as well. And I've worked with any number of companies since. But now, yeah, Cobalt Press, my own company, is my main gig in the RPG field.
And what inspired you to go off on your own?
Well, part of it was the open gaming license, frankly, right? It was possible to publish stuff under your own banner all of a sudden. And part of it was, I said, yeah, why don't we just try, self-publishing? How hard can it be? Little did I know. So, I mean, that they're really two different areas. You could do a whole panel on becoming a publisher. But as a freelancer, I thought it was easy, and publishers sat around smoking fat cigars and and didn't realize it was a reason like 5 or 6 other people would be involved in editing and layout and graphic design and art and cartography, and all of a sudden I was responsible for all that. Whereas as a freelancer, you're kind of free and easy, right? All you need to do is get the gig and meet the deadline and turn over the material and get paid. Well, that sounds easy, but it doesn't always work.
Well, that is kind of a good transition then into Zapper's first question. The one that we knew was coming, but we will try not to focus on, except how it relates to freelancers breaking into the industry. And
Sure.
that is about Cobalt Quarterly coming to an end. That was a pretty big announcement yesterday, and I don't know if anyone really saw it coming.
I don't know if anyone saw it coming. I mean, I've been saying for quite some time that every issue feels like a little miracle, and it's been that way for years, right? We've been broke and scraping by and understaffed, and there's not enough hours in the day and not enough dollars in the bank to make it happen. So in the end, I said, I've got 2 young kids. My wife's totally burnt out. We can't continue. So we hung it up with the announcement yesterday. I have to say I'm still really depressed about it because this is like the 4th magazine I've worked on, and all of them eventually fold, right? I mean, one was a college science fiction magazine. 2 of them were named Dragon and Dungeon. They're still limping around in PDF, but they're not magazines, right? They're like online things. And now Cobalt Quarterly. So it's a great way to break into the field. There are still many, many other magazines out there, but they're tough. They're a tough gig to keep going. I think 5.5 years with Cobalt Quarterly is a good run, and I'm proud of what we achieved, and I'm really grateful to everybody who helped us out.
And sorry, just to get a little bit technical, it looks like I accidentally invited people into the Hangout. You guys can hang out here if you want. I've muted your mics for now just to make sure that you're not in the background, but if you have any questions, you can type them into chat, or in the Aethercon Fest Hall, we are in the Philosopher's Conundrum. Now, let me get the name. Richard Baisley had a very general question. He says, I are a writer, why me no work much?
Grammar hard. Sentence structure difficult. It's a good question. There's two ways to go with that. I mean, on the one hand, um, it could be your pitches aren't connecting, or you're not putting out enough queries to the venues that are open. Often just getting the very first break is the big one, but if you have a rep and you have a bunch of credits already, usually it's a matter of making sure you have your name in at enough companies that know you, so that if any of those markets should disappear, you've still got others to fall back on, because companies go through upswings and downswings as well. I mean, if you were writing, I don't know, 4th edition material for D&D, you might be doing less work right now than you were 2 years ago, right? If you're writing for Savage Worlds, I'd say you're probably on a hot streak. They're doing pretty well right now. So those things change, and sometimes you got to change up what you do as a freelancer. The other problem, of course, is that maybe you burned somebody and the word got around. I don't know, right? But missing a deadline, editors talk amongst themselves. Sometimes that happens. I wouldn't call it a blackball, but it might be that somebody said, hey, this guy really screwed the pooch on this big project I trusted him with. It's hard to say in your personal situation, but if you want more work, I guess you got to pound the pavement electronically to hunt it down.
You've been around long enough to see how, because you mentioned electronic, to see how the landscape for freelancers has changed. So would you say that now that there's a lot more access to editors and to the publishers, does that make it easier or harder for freelancers?
Oh, that's a great question. This is a real two-edged sword, because there are some freelancers I see in my inbox submitting things to Cobalt Press or previously to Cobalt Quarterly, and I'm delighted because, hey, oh, beautiful present, some query for a cool thing. There it is in the inbox, and I can check it out and have a conversation with this freelancer. It's a lot faster. There's no paper, stamps, and envelopes involved. You can meet people on Facebook who you know through their work. At the same time, I'm thinking of, there's a few freelancers who I wish would not show up in my inbox quite so much. It's like, you sent me your query a week ago and I've been busy and I haven't gotten back to you, and you're already asking me where, what happened. So generally, you've got to walk this tightrope as a freelancer between keeping yourself visible, because you definitely want to show up. I mean, artists are good at this too, not just writing freelancers. You got to say, hey, I did this cool new piece and won a Chesley Award. Hey, look at me. And let people know that you're out there. At the same time, if you're in your editor's mailbox all the time about, a really short assignment, and they're probably juggling 30 other things, eventually they're going to just get tired of hearing from you and stop responding, and that's not what you want, right? So my rule of thumb would be, if you poke, email, chat, whatever, your editor more than once a month, you're probably, it's going to vary from editor to editor and project to project, right? But if you're in their inbox every day or every week, it's too much for most outfits, because those editors are working with possibly dozens of freelancers or several major projects, and most of their time is not spent on communication. What they really want to see is that one email that says, here's my turnover, complete and on time. That's the best email.
You mentioned Facebook, and that does bring up a related question. How casual, like how much of a relationship do you have with your freelancers outside of your publishing relation, your professional relationship?
Right. This is something that grows over time. The relationship between editors or freelance liaisons or whatever they call themselves, publisher reps, and you, the writer, is like any other professional business relationship, in that, you don't know each other that well and trust each other that much to begin with. Um, and that grows over time when, like, you make your deadline and, hey, the publisher pays what they said. And they didn't destroy your work in editing it or whatever, right? That after you've done a couple of projects or even one project, you may know each other a little better, and over time you may hang out at a convention. And there may be more email chatter over time, but it's like a new friend. You're not pals exactly, but it's like a new colleague at the office, right? Day one, it's, what's your name? And okay, I'll take you to lunch. We'll do this thing. And by the end of a year, either you know this person and like them, or you know them and dislike them, but you're still doing business together. So yeah, I would say I have friends among the freelancers I work with, but I also work with people who I just have tremendous respect for professionally, and we don't really hang out. That's okay too.
Now, I just sent you a query. Can you help me move this weekend?
Exactly. It's like,
I trimmed down my collection of grand pianos, so you don't have to worry about that.
Oh, great. Well, that's a big plus. You still live on that hill at the top of the staircase?
No, they expanded the hill. We have a question from Zapper from chat. He's saying, with so few magazines surviving, are writers better off serving to try and break in through new media, so launching their own blog or writing for gaming news websites?
Yeah, this is a really great question. I was thinking about it this morning before the panel. There are still a number of magazines. You can still write for Wayfinder and Castle, The Crusader, for CNC, or you can still get something electronic into Dragon. Those are all good things, and those are all nice credits. And the big upside of writing for those periodicals is you pitch a query, you send it off, you forget about it, right? Or you send the article that they asked you to send, and you forget about it. You're done. They either publish it or they don't. The difficulty with new media and its strength is you've got to engage and build an audience, right? So if you're blogging on your own site, or you're building up your Facebook presence, or whatever channel you choose to take, people are going to expect you to provide material, something entertaining, whatever you're thinking about, on a regular basis. It's more work to keep up an online presence than to just shoot off a query to a magazine. But I think in the long run it pays off. You just got to commit the time to it to do it right. If you put out your own blog and you're updating once a month, it might not be worth it. In terms of writing for other blogs, well, sure. I think someplace like Gnome Stew or Critical Hits, or you know these places as well as I do, right? Heck, for that matter, Cobalt Quarterly has a blog, and we publish crunchy material, mostly for Pathfinder, but also D&D. And if you submit something there and it gets accepted, and eventually they ask you to write a column, hey, hooray! You are getting, well, you're getting two things out of that as a freelancer. One is you're getting their whole audience. You don't have to build the new audience from scratch. So suddenly a ton more people know your name because you wrote that cool thing. And the other thing you're getting is you're committing less time to it, probably, right? You are, even if you're a columnist or a regular on one of these big portal sites, you're probably submitting something once a week or every other week, or some schedule like that, which is a lot less frequent than you would need to refresh content on a personal site. So yeah, I think those places are a fine way to get your name out there.
Now, is there any fear from you as the publisher of conflict of interest if you're hiring someone that's supposed to be a reporter for an RPG news site?
Ooh. Huh. I don't know. This doesn't happen that often, but I usually assume as a publisher that somebody is pitching me something they're passionate about, or if I'm going to them, I know that they're a professional. That's why I've approached them, because I've worked with them before. No, I don't think I'd worry about it too much. I think if anything, it's a sort of net positive, right? If they're on a news site and they say, "Yay, I got this cool new project with Cobalt Press," on the news site, well, that's a plus for me. People know about the project, right? And it's a plus for them because they're moving from a news and opinion sort of site into a, hey, somebody's paying money and putting multiple people onto a product that's going to be up for sale. That's a bigger commitment than, hey, we're going to post your brief piece on our news site. Especially when we're talking about 10,000 words with a painted cover, right? I mean, it's a step up. And from there, of course, maybe you go on to a print assignment for somebody. So I think there is a hierarchy of freelance markets, and people having a little bit of a sense of what it is. Being on a news site is a nice launching pad into, hey, I'd like to do something with a small publisher.
And that relates to Richard Balsley's question. He says the conundrum for beginning writers seems to be that you need work to get work. So how do you do that short of creating a blog and visiting a forum, which effectively is a form of self-publishing, or is there really no magic bullet to hone in on an answer for this question?
Well, yeah, you do need work to get work, and it's that first sale it's easy to talk about, but it's hard to get. Yeah. I might be the wrong guy to answer this question because I was lucky. My first query to TSR was accepted, and so was my second query, and they were both published. And then my third query was turned down. They said, "We don't like your query." And I went into a tailspin and said, "Oh my God, I'm doing it wrong. I'm a bad freelance. Why do they hate me? Why?" And I had no idea that getting 2 queries accepted in a row early on was such a total fluke, and it was maybe luck and talent and timing all came together. You need to land that first one somehow, and what you can do is, forums, absolutely. If there's a venue like the Cobalt blog that takes public submissions and then turns them into an article on the site, well, I can assure you, we know all the regulars, right? Everyone who has submitted more than one article to Miranda and gotten it published on that blog is probably someone whose name I know. And name recognition is huge. If I recognize your name on a query or a pitch letter, you're better off, right? It's just human nature. Oh, I know that guy. Okay, let's see what he has to say. You might still get a no, but you're more likely to get a hearing quickly and maybe slightly warmer reception by 1 degree, right? And the other thing you can do is show up at conventions, meet some of the people you want to work for, be polite, be professional, hand them your business card and say, "Hey, I really love your stuff and I want to work for you." That's all you really need to do, because all of a sudden that's one more point of, hey, I think I know this person. I wonder if they're any good. Let's try them out, right? That's what you want to generate, is that curiosity of, well, is this guy any good? Let's try him out. So yeah, put out lots of pitches, put your name in the forums or the blogs if you can, and meet people in person. Some of the smaller conventions are great for this. And beyond that, persistence, persistence, persistence.
There's someone whose name you might recognize in the Philosopher's Conundrum right now, actually. He goes by the name of B. Hodge.
Hey, I know that guy.
You're also assuming this is Brandon Hodge, who's a regular freelancer. I'm assuming it's Brandon Hodge. He basically got his start through you, so why don't you share that story?
Sure. One of the weird ways to get started in the industry is to basically buy a ticket into a freelancers pool. There's a style of freelancing that we do at Cobalt Press called patronage, and I'll talk about that some more in a panel tomorrow, I believe. Um, and what it basically is everybody throws some money in a hat, and people who want can pitch their ideas and write stuff, right? So the projects are collaborative, and it kind of weeds out the general public because you got to have whatever 20 or 50 or $100 to put in the pot. But once you're in, it's like pitch us something, right? Write a monster, write a spell, write a whole adventure. And Brandon did this on a project called Halls of the Mountain King, and he did so well. His first pitch changed the whole direction of the project. He got 2 pitches, 2 whole adventures going in a single project. That was the first time that happened for us. And, he just did great work, and he knocked himself out, and he was on the forums and talking. And, by the end of that 6 months to a year of working with him, I was very, very confident in his abilities as a freelancer. And so when he wanted to lead his own project later on, I was like, yeah, sure, absolutely. Let's put Brandon in charge of a project and see what happens. So that's sort of like the, become an intern at an RPG company to get a job there kind of route. And patronage is open still at Cobalt Press. There's a project now that is just wrapping up, and we'll do a new one next year, probably early next year, and it'll be open to everyone. It's an interesting way to get in. And Brandon, go ahead.
Neil Gaiman gave that commencement speech. He's not in chat. I'm just,
Oh man,
I know, how cool would that have been? He gave that commencement speech where he said that there's 3 skills that a freelance writer can have, or an artist in general: being good, being fast, and being pleasant to work with. And
yes,
all writers can hope to have 2 of these 3 things. Can you just kind of comment on that?
Yeah, well, he's right? It's hard to argue with Mr. Gaiman on this. If you're good and talented and turn in stellar work, of course everyone loves you. And if you're fast or timely, hey, yes, too many people miss deadlines. We hate missing deadlines. It screws everything up. And it makes everyone else run around trying to fix it. Those are 2 everyone agrees with. I think the one that people don't recognize quite as much is the third one he identified, namely pleasant to work with. There are people who show up at these patronage project sort of open call things, and they get on the forums and they're just obnoxious, right? They hate everything. Their criticism is always sort of sneering, or I don't know, they just don't get along with other people. And you say to yourself, well, this is a collaborative design project. Why did you show up if you don't want to collaborate? And they usually wander off after a while, because no one wants to work with them. It's exactly the same story with every other freelance project, right? If you can sit down at a publisher's booth at a slow period in the dealer hall, right, at some small convention where they're not releasing their brand new product, but don't do this at Gen Con. But at PaizoCon, you can sit down with folks and just have a chat and be pleasant, or see them in the bar later because, hey, I recognize that guy from the dealer room. That's the guy in charge of Cobalt Press. That's the guy in charge of Lewis Porter's thing. He's, talk to that guy. If you can be nice, then of course people are more likely to want to work with you. It just seems obvious and commonsensical, but some freelancers don't get that.
Now, if a freelancer is reflecting on themselves saying, well, I give quality work and I'm on time and I'm pleasant to work with, which one are they most likely overestimating?
I don't know. It really depends. On time is pretty cut and dried, right? And most people know whether they're pleasant to work with, or they have some sense of, I'm an introvert and I'm abrasive and you're just going to have to deal with it. So if I had to choose one that people overestimate, maybe it's the quality of work, because I don't know. That's why we pay editors and developers and other people. But I mean, I've done a ton of writing, and I know sometimes I can tell, oh, this project really went well, and other times I can tell, wow, I really wanted that project to go well, but I'm out of time and I don't know how to fix it, and I'm going to turn it over with a bit of an apology and say, I think the first third is good. I, so maybe quality is the one that's hardest to judge yourself on. Let me just
Now,
say
while we're waiting for more questions to come in, why don't you tell us a little bit about what freelancers can expect working with an editor?
Sure. Freelancers working with an editor in the RPG field really should have much, much lower expectations than, I don't know, than the world at large seems to think, right? I know there are freelancers who think, I'm going to get notes back from my editor, and they're going to ask me to revise stuff, and they're going to, talk with me and make me a better writer. Some people expect that stuff on a query, and I can tell you right now, you're not getting any of that on a query, right? A query is a straight up-down, yes, we would like to see this, or no, that's a horrible idea, or we just published that last month. Did you not check our PDF series? So you get a lot less feedback with an editor than you might think. Most of the companies I worked with, both at TSR and Wizards, there was exactly zero feedback from my editor. I would turn over a manuscript, it would be published some months later in book form, and I would say, hey, look, there's a book. Magic happened between the time I turned over text and the time it turned into a printed thing. And having a relationship with an editor is awesome, but working with them, the standard is you get no feedback. Now, that's not always true. Smaller presses tend to spend more time developing their writers because they have less writers to begin with, and they often don't have money to pay like super hotshot writers. So what do, right? They try to work with the authors they have and say, well, here's 6 things that you do all the time, and here's your passive voice, and please don't do this on your headers, and here's 6 things. Don't do these on the next project. And that's a reasonable thing to expect. There are a few editors who will have an ongoing back and forth dialogue with their writer, but this is really the exception. I know of one editor at Cobalt Press who does this. He's awesome. I don't expect it, right? It's a sad reality that editors are too busy to really spend a lot of time on developing writers.
Now let's talk a little bit about the financial side of being a freelancer. What do most publishers pay starting freelancers, and what's kind of the upper echelon that some freelancers can hope to achieve?
Sure. Well, it's usually measured by the word for freelance writing, and in the tabletop RPG field, beginning writers, it's like, okay, lucky to get paid at all. It's really tough to get that first paying gig. Everyone's happy to take your work when it's free. Blogs are notorious for this, right? It's like, oh, we love your work. We love your work. We love your work. Hey, could you guys pay me a penny a word? Oh, no, sorry, we're done with you. And I mean, to be fair, Cobalt's blog doesn't pay generally, right? We're like, people pitch us stuff, and we take the best of it and print it, and it gets edited. But we have no money for art, and it's a blog. So there's that, which is more about getting your name out there. But then in terms of, hey, I'm writing for a PDF publisher, I'm getting paid a penny a word. I'm getting paid 2 pennies a word. I'm getting paid, oh my God, I'm a hotshot, I'm getting paid 3 cents a word, right? these are not great rates, but they also haven't changed very much in the RPG field, mostly because there are more people who want to write than there is audience like to buy that volume of writing, right? Um, the demand exists in tabletop RPGs. You see the books everywhere, but yeah. So, and then at the top level, I mean, if you're Ed Greenwood or you're Monty Cook or somebody, um, then you're not getting 3 cents a word, right? You're getting substantially more. And I don't know what those guys get paid, but you can look at you can look at Monty Cook's Kickstarter, right? And you can subtract out all the costs it's going to take to actually print those books and ship those books and edit and illustrate and everything. And you can still say to yourself, Monty's got to be making 10 cents a word minimum. I don't know the details of his finances, but if you're at the top end of the field, you're doing better. In other fields as a freelance writer outside of gaming, I know that rates of 25 cents a word, 50 cents a word are not unheard of. But by that time, you're way out of gaming. You're a financial reporter, or you're recording, you're blogging on the healthcare industry. So that may not be what you want, but there's a reason that some freelancers have a here's my paying the bills work, and here's my I love doing tabletop RPG work, and they're two separate buckets of work because the pay scale is not good.
And sorry, I was just trying to look up who is the author of The Expanded Shaman, your New Paths 2.
Why, that is Mark Radel, who is awesome. He did the Shaman first for, what was it, KQ21, I want to say? Maybe it was 19.
I accept either answer.
Yes. But yeah, he's one of those guys who showed up and wrote a bunch of stuff and was active in the forums and then submitted something to the magazine. Actually, he submitted a bunch of queries to the magazine, and that was one that got accepted. And everyone was excited about the Shaman class, and readers loved it. So we said, let's do an expanded version and do it as its own separate PDF. And it has been very well received.
And the reason I bring that up is because I was looking at the blog, and I know that there's the many spirits of the Shaman archetypes
Yes.
for the Spirit Shaman regular series now, and I just assumed it was the same author as the Shaman, which I assumed was Mark Radel, but I see that this blog series is by Margarita Tramontano.
Yes. Well, she did a very good thing for a freelancer, right? Margarita said, oh, look, the Shaman thing. It was in the magazine, and it was successful enough to generate a PDF spin-off. Huh. I wonder if people would like some archetypes for that, right? That was just the sort of logical next step as a gamer. It's like, here's this cool new base class. Everybody seems to like it. It's doing really well for Cobalt Press. Let's give them something additional. So that archetype series, it's up to part 4 now, and very popular, according to the hit counter. So that's an nice way to get yourself that first gig we were talking about earlier, right? Is hit your star to something that's already working. I mean, it's not your original thing, but if it means you get a 5-part series on the blog and, you have a name like Margarita that's easy to remember.
Fun to say.
Yes. Then, hey, all of a sudden she's a freelancer on my radar, right? Which she sure wasn't before this. It's the first thing she's done for us.
And if I could just continue talking about Mark.
Sure.
I know that he also does some editing. Does he do layout? I know he wears multiple hats.
He does. He doesn't really edit for us. He does layout. And he does a really good job with it. He's done the layout on the upcoming Journeys to the West book, the recent Player's Guide to the Crossroads, which is the #1 best-selling PDF at Paizo this week.
Congratulations.
Thanks. I was very pleased. He didn't do layout for the magazine, but he's done a ton of them, right? And he's like our regular art director at this point.
So the reason I was bringing that up is that he wears a lot of hats. Is that like, is it good as a freelancer to focus on a single thing? Like, I'm a writer, I write, give me writing work, or are you better off diversifying your portfolio?
That's an excellent question. I don't think there's a single answer. A lot of gamers are talented, multi-talented, really bright, outstanding in their field, or just really excited and enthusiastic and passionate about something and then about the next thing. I tend to think you're better to specialize, but I know layout people who've moved into cartography. I know writers who are also artists. You know, some people have multiple talents. I can't draw for beans, but I guess I count as multi-talented because I do game design and I do editing and publishing. So I have no graphic image visual skills, but that's fine. Other people do. If you have multiple talents, sometimes it's an easy way to make yourself stand out, right? If you turn in a pitch and say, here's a sketch of what I think this new monster looks like, and somebody says, well, I don't know, sketch? That looks awesome. You've put yourself a cut above. But if you aren't multi-talented, that's no impediment to getting ahead as a freelancer. I think it's easier for publishers to slot you into one bucket. It's hard for me to wrap my brain around, well, Mark is really awesome at layout. Oh, yeah, and he wrote that thing, too. So.
We have a question from Old Man.
Mm-hmm.
What is the minimum, if any, of output? So, for example, a word count per week for a freelancer to be successful.
I'd ask you to define successful, but okay.
To feel good about themselves.
Well, you look at someone like Matt Forbeck, who is among the most caffeine-powered robots of all freelancers of all time. He's awesome, and he regularly does, 4,000 words a day.
Wow.
Yeah, and he's operating at the upper end of talent, experience, ability, sleeplessness. He's really doing amazing output. I don't think I've ever sustained 4,000 words a day for more than a week. When I was on it.
That must have been one hell of a week.
It was a hell of a week, but it was a hell of a deadline, and most of what came out of it was like, God, I need to rewrite all this. So, that's great, and he is a full-time freelancer, and he supports a family and a mortgage, I suspect, right? And he's really, really at the top of the game. I don't think most people can do that without having, like he does, 10 or 15 or more years experience in the field. As a beginning freelancer, you're more likely to be like, I did 200 words today, or I did 500 words today, and I did it before I went off to the day job or before I went to school, or I think the main thing is not your daily word count so much as being able to produce consistently. If you have long, long dry spells, you are doomed as a freelancer. And if you can't write on days when you don't feel like writing, you're kind of doomed as a freelancer, because sometimes you don't have the option, right? It's like you need to make this thing work, and you need to produce every single day. So to give a counterpoint to Matt Forbeck's amazing number, I kind of regularly produce around 300 to 500 words a day and consider myself successful, because, hey, that's like 2,500 words a week, and sometimes it's 4,000 words a week. But 4,000 words a week times, 52 weeks, it adds up pretty fast. So yeah, consistency. Consistency matters, and whether you call yourself successful or not, I think that may be a question of how much do I need to write to quit my day job, and that depends as much on your client list and your the rate you're getting paid as it does on your output.
Now, let's say you haven't quit your day job and maybe you're raising a family. What are some productivity tips you might have for beginning freelancers?
Yeah. Habits are good. Habits are excellent. Writing at the same time and in the same place and not stopping until you hit your target, those are all great things. Trying to, wait around for inspiration is usually a fool's game. So you need to get the same habits, use the same tools, whatever encourages you to say, I'm a morning person, I'm an evening person, I'm setting aside this block of time every single day to get it done. I think if you've got a day job and you've got a family, you really need to carve out time that you know is not going to get interrupted. Actually, a novelist I know and used to work with, Robert King, wrote, I think, his first, second, and third novel on his lunch breaks.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, he didn't, his day job was he was an editor at TSR. But every day, instead of going out for lunch with us or whatever, he had his sandwich and he had an apple or whatever it was he ate, and then he had like 45 minutes to write. And he made the most of that time. He put his headphones on, he put up the do not disturb sign or whatever he did, and that was his 45 minutes a day. And over the course of months, and with his, talent and perseverance, he wrote whole books on a lunch break because he was consistent about it. And that discipline is really what makes a freelancer shine.
Were there a lot of scenes of the heroes stopping and having lunch?
I suspect there may have been a certain amount of that. Some freelancers may find that, scenes of blessed sleep creep into their output. But yeah, writerly discipline. We got to find it somewhere.
Yeah, but the latest season of Walking Dead won't watch itself.
I know it won't. That's why you need to unplug your cable completely. It's tough, right? You are going to give up stuff to make time for this. I would hope that most people don't give up friends and family, but maybe they find another way to work it into a regular schedule.
You actually do mention your wife Shelley a lot in the blog post about Cobalt Quarterly folding, and you often refer to we when you're talking about it, even though most people, I think of Cobalt Quarterly. Like when they think of Cobalt Quarterly, they think of you.
Sure.
So how important is having a support network like that at home?
Oh, it's crucial if you're running a small business, right? Because there's shipping and accounting and customer service and all of those things like, hey, we need a business license that are not in the least bit sexy, right? It's just like, oh, man, we need to renew that again. Paperwork, accounts, but without it, you're not getting stuff done, and you're not functioning. And for a freelancer, right? I mean, Shelley's crucial to Cobalt Press. And people who see us at conventions like PaizoCon kind of get that, right? She's at the booth, she's running stuff, it's her show. She just calls me over when she wants me to answer a gaming question or an editorial question. And yet sort of the basic freelancing lesson of this is you need to know which of your work has gone out, what your priorities are, and who's paid you and who hasn't paid you. I sort of divide the pro artists from the amateur artists by how relentless are they if I am a day late paying them, right? Because when Cobalt Press needs to pay, we usually pay on time, but once in a while a payment slips for some reason because oh yeah, that product pays on publication, and I told this guy it was going to publish in August, but it's actually not publishing till September. Well, what do you know? There's a email in my inbox from the artist saying, hey, you said this was an August pub and I haven't been paid. Oh yeah, actually I forgot to tell you it got delayed till September, right? People who know what is owed and what's coming up and really track all of that are doing better. You don't have to be an accountant, but you do need to keep on top of your invoicing and billing as a freelancer, and Uh, yeah, that's part of just being a pro, right? Is you show up, you do the work, you get paid.
We have to get going in a couple of minutes. Adam Daigle is going to be coming into the Philosopher's Conundrum soon. So, Wolfgang, why don't you just tell us any final thoughts you have on freelancing and tell us what's in the future for Cobalt Press?
Sure. On freelancing, I would say that we've talked about sort of becoming a pro and doing this with consistency. But for a lot of people, freelancing is a aspiration and outlet for creativity rather than a full-time profession. And you might be surprised at the number of people who are artists whose name you know and game designers who, still have a day job or only write one book a year, or they seem very happy with their creative output as freelancers, but their goal isn't necessarily to become a staffer at Wizards of the Coast or something like that. And that's okay. I think a lot of people sort of assume that if you're not aiming for a full-time gig, you're not a real freelancer, but that's not the case. I think the main thing is you need to have some talent, some discipline, and a love of the game. So if you've got that, you should totally give it a shot. There's no reason not to. As to what's up for Cobalt Press, we have a number of cool things coming out. We have some support books and adventures for Midgard coming. And the one big opportunity that I would mention to all freelancers right now is we have an open call / contest where I'm trying to find some new freelancers to work with Cobalt Press. The contest is called Valhalla Calling. It is an adventure design contest. Anyone can enter. There's no fee. There's no nothing. You just need to show up with a 400-word pitch by the 20th of December. And I've got some cool judges like that Brandon Hodge guy who are helping me winnow through. We're only taking 100 entries, and we've already got like 20. So it may not go till December 20th. But anybody who wants to can basically throw their best 400-word adventure pitch in. And if you're the winner, or frankly, if you are one of the finalists, you have just made a big impression and improved your odds of future work, not just at Cobalt Press, but anywhere. Because it's like RPG Superstar in that if you win a contest over 100 other people or 1,000 other people, all of a sudden editors and publishers who might have ignored you previously say, hey, yeah, you won that or you were a finalist. Yeah, your thing rocked. And they see that your work has floated to the top of a very competitive field. So I'd encourage everyone who has a little time and interest in adventure writing to put that pitch together and get it in Valhalla Calling contest sooner rather than later, because we're doing that contest. We'll do another one next year, but they only come around every so often. And it's an avenue that is a throw of the dice and a bit of a lottery ticket, but having read thousands of entries myself as a judge on RPG Superstar, I can tell you, like, the bottom 80% are usually the ones who are just not making it. And the top 20, yeah, they've all got something going. But if you don't enter, right, you don't win. And even just making that finalist status is a really nice credential for a new freelancer to wave around and say, hey, look at me. I've got some chops. Watch me work. So give it a shot.
And where can people find out more about Valhalla Calling and Cobalt Press?
Well, it is at the cobaltquarterly.com website, or your nearest local search engine will probably return it. We're probably moving the site to be Cobalt Press going forward, but there's been a lot going on, so haven't quite moved the domain name. You'll find it at cobaltquarterly.com.
And thank you very much, Wolfgang, for joining us. And thank you for everyone that sat in on the chat and provided questions. If people want to sit in for the next chat, it's with Adam Daigle. It is on from freelancer to full-time developer, and it is here in the Philosopher's Conundrum. And Wolfgang, I believe you offered to chat in Ox and Mule for anyone that didn't get a chance to ask a question during the chat.
Yeah, I think I'm heading over there for at least a few minutes, so maybe I'll see some of you there.
Cool. So people can go to Aethercon.com, click on the Halls, Fest Hall link, and click on the Ox and Mules logo. All right. Thanks a lot, Wolfgang. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you.
I don't know how to turn this off. Oh, there we go. I think.